Would you listen as the Spirit of God brings the word to you this morning? For I, Paul, want you to know how much I am struggling for you. For you and for those in Laodicea, and for all who have not even seen me face to face, I want all your hearts to be encouraged and united in love, so that they may have all the riches of assured understanding and have the knowledge of God's mystery, that is, Christ himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and of knowledge. I am saying this so that no one may deceive you with plausible arguments. For though I am absent in body, yet I am with you in spirit, and I rejoice to see your morale and the firmness of your faith in Christ. Hear what the Spirit is saying to our church. With all of the dangers, of environmental degradation that has the potential of moving huge populations from one place to another over the next years, with the dangers of nuclear proliferation, the kind of response to war that people have, the angry response of violence back and forth, that sense that there's such a thing as redemptive violence, that we can control things in that way, with those crises, with the economic stability that seems rife among us. We need unity at this point more than maybe we ever have. And yet unity in church and in state is something that just seems to elude us. Something we can't quite get a hold of. We act in ways that perpetuate division. In fact, we really just react in ways that perpetuate division. We hurt each other with some regularity, and when you think about it, the hurt and the counter-hurt and the hurt again get so twisted up, they cycle so quickly that we begin to lose track of where it all started. And unity suffers. The wisdom of God suffers. The mystery suffers. And we need it in times of dangerous disunity and difficulty. Speaking to an Israeli soldier yesterday, he's here visiting, and I was really struck by how this plays out for him. This is what a great kid he was. He spent 2 years in theological school before going into the army. Now, apparently in Israel, if you do that, you can reduce the amount of time that you spend in the army. Everybody has to go in for a certain length of time, but if you do theological school, you can reduce it, but not him. No, he was going to do both, and he was going to do both right out of a deep sense of the presence of God in his life, and got to talking to him about the violence in the Middle East. Actually, he kept wanting to bring it up as though he was defending Israel to me, not something you actually have to do with me. And there just seemed to be this blind spot. It was as though he was claiming, well, there has to be violence. We have to react when violence comes at us. And I don't deny at all the state of Israel's claim to need to be able to defend itself and to provide security for its people. I don't deny that at all, but I think we also have to recognize that just reacting in violence keeps sending the spiral downward. Anyway, it really struck me. It was a blind spot. Seems to be true in our national church as well. Are we really still arguing about whether or not we're going to support gay marriage? This Tuesday at our presbytery meeting, Janie Spar may or may not be rebuked for having performed a legal marriage. And you got to ask yourself, why are we hurting each other like this? What's the deal that makes us move into such disunity and difficulty? Our communities meaning the individual communities of the church, seem to respond to a lot of these pressures. Not just this church, but they respond to a lot of these pressures with a great deal of anxiety and fear. And so our communities all over the nation are dividing, splitting, people angry, people hurt. The number of people that the Committee on Ministry of this, number of churches that the Committee on Ministry of this presbytery has to deal with is astounding. It's like at any one time, it's a third of us. Unity somehow escapes us. Maybe you know that moment in your own life with your own best friend, your own partner, whatever it is, that moment when you say that thing, you know, and you just, the moment it comes out of your mouth, you just want to, oh, could I have that back? Could I have it back? Because we end up hurting each other as we do those things. Unity seems to escape us. We react, don't do the right thing. Some of you know that I teach preaching at the seminary over here. And year after year after year, the students will stand up and they'll preach a sermon in which they tell us all what we are supposed to do. As though we don't know. You know, I could tell you right now, stop saying things that hurt people. Is that new information to you? Of course it's not. But we don't, and it seems that neuroscientists can tell us why. It's because we think that we have rational control over the things that we say when in fact we do not. It is our emotional brains. It is the subconscious place where we decide to act. I mean, they can actually picture it. You know, they can show you imaging where that emotional part of your brain that decides to act fires up and moves before the cognitive has any chance to deal with it. It's no wonder we are unable to attain the unity that we long for, because we seem to be wired for division, wired for selfishness, wired for protection, I guess, and fear. It's a little bit like an art critic. You know, you see a piece of art, right? You know in a fraction of a second whether or not you like it. And then the art critic goes on for a page and a half explaining to you why. The cognitive shifts in later, not earlier. So what to do? What to do? It's fascinating the way this emotional brain, this internal system works. There's been some research done, apparently in various chicken farms all over the world. When the chickens are first born, you have to be able to separate them into sexes, male and female. And there really isn't any way to do that. You can't really tell when they're that young. You know, it would just take an extraordinary length of time, but some people just can. You know, so they pick up a chicken, they know, yeah, male, female, yeah, got it. They just know, right? And how do you get other people then to be able to do the splitting, the sexing of chickens? Well, the answer is you have somebody that can do it. Stand over somebody's shoulder. And if they're standing over the shoulder, this person picks up a chicken and says, oh, female. Nope. All right. That one's, and you do that over and over again until finally the person gets it. They just know. It's a remarkable thing to be able to train the internal thinking mechanisms. And that's actually what I think the Apostle Paul or his disciple is getting at in this passage. Trying to help us understand how to train ourselves to see the wisdom of God and to build the unity that we can have together. This word that he says, I hope that you will be united in love. That united is symbibasthenes. So sum always means together in Greek. And biba, that moves towards book, learning. All right? So this unity that Paul is talking about is a unity that comes from training together. All right? It's not just something that happens out of the clear blue sky. It's a training together. So he's desiring that we be united, trained together in a particular thing, and the thing is love. You know, love. And this love is a creative love. It's the kind of love that in any given situation steps back and asks, what is the most productive thing I can do for the person I'm talking to? How do I recognize the other person's point of view? The other person who's just reacting the way I'm reacting. There's no superiority here, but an opportunity to reflect and ask yourself and train yourself to think in terms of what will put value into the other human being. Now, that doesn't always mean giving in. Not at all. Sometimes that can mean challenging. Sometimes that can mean putting up boundaries. But it's always the effort that Colossians counsels to look for that so that we can train our internal minds to act out of that place. It's a work of constant reflection. Now, of course, that's kind of dangerous stuff. Because if I, for instance, were to deal with, let's say, my friend Ted, who I've had some problems with at one time or another in life, if I were just sort of go ahead and care about him and what's best for him and what's going to help him grow, all right, is there any guarantee that he will reciprocate? Well, no, which is part of the problem. No guarantee at all. And then you begin to wonder, well, okay, what am I going to do about that? And we end up getting in this position where we need to reflect upon wisely where the boundaries are, how we protect, how we work with the person that's there, how we seek the best in them, but not necessarily how we just leave ourselves open to whatever. But it does require risk. That's the thing about love. This creative strength of God, it requires some risk. And so with thoughtfulness, we seek unity to be trained up together in the power of God's love, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a love that creates, that takes that which is hurt and destroyed and makes it whole. That's what we seek to do together with this love. I think it was Kim Il-sung who in the early 70s, leader of North Korea, if I have my history right, I mixed the leaders up some, but I'm pretty sure it's Kim Il-sung, who made a threat during Carter's tenure that he was going to turn Seoul into a sea of fire. It was an international crisis. People were scared. Apparently some people in Seoul were so scared they committed suicide. They wanted to get away from whatever it was. The UN was trying to figure out what to do. People were gearing up their armies. And President Carter called him. We don't really know what he said, but we do know that Carter was reaching out with some voice of reconciliation, some interest in finding the common ground. And 2 days later, he backed off. This is looking, some way looking for the greater good for the people that are there. It trains the mind so that rather than reacting out of fear, we are trained to react out of love. United in love is what it says, because as we become united in love, educated, trained up in the creative power of God, we know the mystery of God. we begin to see the wisdom, the template, the framework of all creation, and how God is carrying it forward. Not God up there, but the God that powers creation, that moves creation forward in evolution. We see that wisdom, and then we can begin to see God's face in one another. We have an opportunity. Us in this church, church at large, in our nation. It starts with individuals. We have an opportunity to heal one another, to reach unity with one another by practicing, reflecting, training our own hearts, the place from which we live, to live out of the love of God. It doesn't come naturally. You got to work at it.